While I was gathering some of the ingredients for the cookies that we're going to make today, I realized I had forgotten to get some brown sugar. You would have thought that while I'm getting cookie making ingredients that I would have thought about brown sugar, but it slipped my mind. So we're going to go ahead and make some brown sugar at home. And in order to do so, all I'm going to need are just two simple ingredients. One is the cane sugar that I had gotten in my last Azure pickup, and then just a little bit of molasses. And the more molasses that you add to your brown sugar, the darker that it's going to get. And I'm just going to use my stand mixer to make up our brown sugar. So let me quick readjust you and I'll show you how that's done. All I have done thus far is just add in some Azure cane sugar into my bowl. And I'm going to put in a little bit of baking molasses. So I'm going to start my mixer and raise my bowl. And then I'm just going to drizzle in a little bit of molasses. And let that mix up. And let me go get my shield. And we're at a light brown sugar right now, so I think I'm going to go ahead and add just a touch more. Even though in today's recipe we do have some sugar cookies that will require some brown sugar, it's not very much, but I just personally prefer the taste of dark brown sugar in our baked goods. So I'm just going to turn this back on. There, that looks much better. And as you can see, it's just like the regular brown sugar that you would get at the store, because all brown sugar is just sugar and molasses. And since everything that we're doing today is cookie related, I am not going to clean out my mixer. I'm just going to leave this little tiny bit of, brown sugar crumbles that is left in here. I think that will be just fine. I don't believe that's going to hurt anything one iota today. So in today's recipe, what we are going to need for our peppermint sugar cookies is 358 grams, or approximately 2 3/4 cups of all-purpose flour, which I have already pre-measured, and I've placed it in this bowl. And then we're going to need 1 teaspoon of baking soda. So let me quick toss that in. We're also going to need a 1/2 teaspoon each of both baking powder and salt. And that is all that we're going to need in our wet ingredients. So I'm just going to quick kind of shift this together, because nobody likes to bite into a hunk of either baking soda or baking powder or a chunk of salt. So we're going to cream together 1 cup of butter that's been at room temperature, 233 grams of granulated sugar, and 28 grams of brown sugar. So for our granulated sugar, that's going to be approximately 1 cup and 2 tablespoons. And for our brown sugar, that's going to be 2 tablespoons. So I've got a couple of sticks of butter here that's already at room temperature. I'm going to drop that in my mixer. And I always find it easier for me to add my ingredients without my paddle on. I just find my paddle gets in the way when I'm doing that. Because sometimes I'll just take my bowl right off my stand mixer, drop all my stuff in, and then just put it back on the mixer. I hate trying to work around my paddle. Is anybody else the same way? A cup and a couple of tablespoons. And since we're doing a number of batches today, I just decided to bring out my large container instead of refilling my smaller container that I keep everything in. My 2 tablespoon measure. And I usually don't weigh out my ingredients other than my flour. I know I really should, but I just haven't gotten into the habit of that on my baking items. So we're going to go ahead and cream this together. And I always start my creaming on low until the butter has a chance to grab some of that sugar so that it's not everywhere in the kitchen. And it would help if I throw in those 2 tablespoons of brown sugar that we just made, wouldn't it? And I always pack my brown sugar. I just assume when somebody says X amount of brown sugar, they are automatically talking about packed brown sugar. So let's get that in the recipe. And I'm just going to bring this off of the edges of our mixing bowl. And because we have that brown sugar in there, it's not going to get quite as light and ribbony looking as you would normally get with a creamed sugar and butter, or I should say a white sugar and butter. And my sugar is actually a little bit darker. It's more on the tan side because it's a less processed or less refined sugar, and it's not as finely granulated as some of the other bag sugars. Just need to add 1 room temperature egg. And you do want to make sure that your ingredients, when you do cookies, are at room temperature. I just find that they turn out a little bit better. The butter just seems to cream in a little bit better. You get a smoother, more consistent cookie when you're working with everything that is, especially with the butter, that is at room temperature. You don't want it too hard and you don't want it too melty, because otherwise that doesn't cream together quite right either. And you just want your egg well incorporated into your creamed mixture here. And we're going to need both vanilla and peppermint, and a teaspoon of vanilla and a teaspoon of peppermint. I normally don't measure my vanilla, but since this is a dual one, I am going to go ahead and do that. So that's what an actual teaspoon of vanilla looks like. I can guarantee you I use more than that. And then a teaspoon of peppermint extract. Oh, does that smell good? Nothing says winter quite like the smell of peppermint. And I just want to make sure that the entire wet ingredients of this batter has both of those extracts really, really mixed in very, very well of my paddle, because it will not get mixed in when we do the sugar cook or when we do the dry batter, because there just is not this is not a big enough recipe for this particular mixer to get anything off the top of the batter. If I triple this recipe, I don't have to be as particular about scraping everything down, because then it's just fine. But as a single sized recipe, I have to be a little bit more careful about making sure that I get everything off my paddle and everything off of my sides, because otherwise I do run into having butter on the bottom. I am just going to drop in all of my flour mixture, because it is just so much easier that way. And I want my flour just lightly blended. And you can see that it's starting to make a dough. And I'm going to call that good. And we're going to add in 1 1/4 cups of our white chips. And then as this is blending, I'm going to add the rest of the white chips. There we go. And then the last thing we need to add in is our peppermint. Now, I made a mistake while I was out shopping, and I would have swore that we had picked up the regular peppermint candies. Unfortunately, what we had gotten were the soft candies, and I have never baked with these before. So you would normally unwrap your little peppermint candies and then crush them up, which is what I've done. I've unwrapped them and I've put them in this little baggie. I'm going to bash the daylights out of them with a rolling pin. And then I'm going to drop in about 6 tablespoons of the little crushed peppermint candies. And hopefully the soft ones work the same as the hard ones do. Alrighty. They don't smash quite as easily as the hard ones do, but I think they'll be all right. And normally what I would do is after I roll these, I would normally dip an edge of my cookies into the chunks. But since these are soft, I don't want to do that. And I think the bigger chunks are going to be just fine because it's soft. And I'm going to add some extra peppermints just because they're bigger. I'm going to throw in just a little bit more, and then I'll mix the rest by hand. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to chill this dough in the refrigerator for about 15 to 20 minutes. It's not necessary, but I do find that if I do chill it, it doesn't spread quite as much. You don't have to do it, but I usually do. And while this is in the refrigerator, I'm going to go ahead and prepare some baking trays. And I think a single recipe gets me maybe 3 dozen cookies is what I'm thinking. I don't know if I'm going to bake up all 3 dozen. I think I'm going to put some in the freezer to bake up at a later date. Okay, we've gotten everything scooped out of the mixing bowl and out of the refrigerator. And I just used a regular cookie scoop. And we've just gone ahead and we've rolled them into balls. So you just grab your dough and do a quick roll. And you want to keep them, fairly chilled. So you want to be rather quick about it. And then we want to have our oven set at 350 before you pop your cookies in. So make sure that you have that preheated. So I am just going to space out all my cookies on my trays before I pop mine in, because that I did not do, and there's a few of them I did not roll. And they will spread a little bit. So if you want to, you can press them down or you can leave them rounded at the top. That is totally up to you. It's whatever your preference is. And then we are going to bake these cookies at 350 degrees. And you want to bake them between 7 and 9 minutes. You want them to be, how can I explain this? You want them to be that the tops may not appear like they're completely done, but you want them still to be soft and chewy. So they actually are finished. If you cook them all the way through where they look like they're all the way done on the top, they are going to be so incredibly hard and not very tasty at all. So just a slight little bit of brown around the edges, and the tops are going to be kind of puffed up, but they will flatten out whenever as the cookies cool once you take them out of the oven. And I usually let mine cool on my sheet for just a few minutes before I either put them on a cooling rack, or sometimes I just let them cool on a countertop or a table or what have you. So let's go ahead and get these in the oven. If you have a couple of ovens, you can do one tray at a time. Because I have a number of cookies I want to get done today, I'm just going to put all 3 of mine in my oven, and hopefully I've got enough room that I can go every other rack. If not, I'll just have to figure it out. Okay, the cookies are out of the oven, and it is the next day after doing the peppermint white chocolate cookies and then doing dinner. My niece started to bother me quite a lot, so I decided instead of finishing my cookies last night, I would just work on them today. Okay, and as you can see, they turned out to be a really nice, tall, chewy, and absolutely delicious sugar cookie base with the peppermint candies and the white chocolate chips. And I wasn't sure how these were going to taste because I had used the wrong candies. Remember, I had gotten the soft ones instead of the normal hard peppermint candies that we had crushed up. Oh my gosh, so good, because I thought I was going to miss the change in texture and flavor. Do not miss whatsoever.